Hello and welcome back to my Gingerbread Dollhouse Renovation series. My name is Jahan, and if you can, go back and watch part 1 where I discuss all my plans for this dollhouse renovation, including why I want to be as sustainable as possible, and part 2 where I give the exterior of this dollhouse a complete DIY makeover, including how I ice the shingles and what my plans are for icing the rest of the exterior of this dollhouse. I'm really excited because for this entire Gingerbread Dollhouse renovation series, I have partnered with Renovating Australia, and I can tell you from working on the exterior alone, there is no way I would be able to do this project without their tools. Okay, so for part 3, I'm going to be working on the floors, the walls, and the ceilings. For me, the most challenging part of planning the floors and the walls and the ceilings is finding the perfect wallpaper. There are a few reasons why I've actually found this quite challenging. The first is trying to find something that I like that is also in a dollhouse scale of 1 to 12. Additionally, I want to make sure that every room has its own scheme and color palette, but I also need to make sure that all the rooms go together beautifully. If you've got any tips, ideas, or advice for this Gingerbread Dollhouse renovation, which I'm hoping to complete by Christmas for my kids, please let me know in the comments. On one of my other videos, I had someone suggest that I look at Etsy for dollhouse wallpaper, which I can buy, download, and print, which I thought was a genius idea. I really appreciate comments like this, so I'm gonna need all the help I can get. Anyway, there is a lot to do, and I'm so excited to dive in, so let's get making. So I'm sitting in the car park at Spotlight, and I've come down here today to choose the final pieces of paper for the walls in a couple of the rooms in the dollhouse. It's actually been probably the hardest aspect of my dollhouse journey so far because there's a few things I need to factor in. The first is the scale of the paper that I choose. So I really want to go pretty heavy with a cottage theme. I'm adopting the secret room rule. So I need to make sure that the flowers I choose are of miniature scale, because if you choose wallpaper with flowers that are too big for a room in a dollhouse, it can look completely off. The second thing is you can buy wallpaper, like paper, which is basically scrapbook paper, on Etsy, eBay, and your local craft and hobby stores. So I have been buying a few different things online, a few different bits of paper online, but when it's arrived, it just hasn't been right, which is fine because I've given it all to the kids. Anything that I don't use, I've given to the kids for their craft box. So I have 4 out of the 6 rooms already locked in, and I need to just finalize the last 2 rooms. Now at Spotlight you can buy individual scrapbook sheets, which is way more cost effective than buying their scrapbook books, in my honest opinion, because the scrapbook books are about $30 to $40 each. You get quite a few different sheets. However, if you only need between 3 or 6 within that book, it can actually be quite expensive. And in addition to that, there's no way you're going to love every single sheet in a scrapbook book, like a scrapbook paper book. There's just no way. And when I break it down, I just think if I can buy individual sheets, that's what I'm going to do, especially when I've only got a couple of rooms left to go. I did actually go back to one of my favorite gift shops in Koroy called Galar, and the lady who works there let me have a meter of their gift wrapping paper. It was this beautiful gingham paper, but when I put it into the living room, it was just too pale. And I want my rooms, first of all, there's 3 things. First of all, every room has a different color scheme. They need to be quite, not dark, but the colors need to be bold. And I felt that the gingham paper, gift wrapping paper, was just too pale, like to the point where if you pulled back, you couldn't actually see the print. And additionally, with the cottage look on the dollhouse, it looks better if every single room has floral paper on the walls and the ceilings as well, because I feel like if you're covering the walls and the ceilings, it will just make the whole room more impactful. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a mind bender because I'm such a visual person. I've basically on the floor of my studio, I've just mapped out each room. I've put down the wallpaper, you know, furniture that I've managed to collect so far, you know, bits of different thrifted fabric. Like I've even thrifted a little doily, which I'll be using as a rug for Celeste's room. And I've been putting down like my color swatches just to try and figure out the scheme for each room. So I've actually bought some of that with me today. And when I go up to Spotlight, I'm going to lay it all out and try and hopefully choose the final pieces of paper for the last two rooms, which is actually our bedroom and the bathroom, well, the ensuite. So wish me luck. Hopefully I can find what I need. Off I walk into the craft store with my supplies, including paint swatches, thrifted fabric, and some tiny pieces of decor to help me choose the final wallpaper for the last couple of rooms in the dollhouse. I love craft stores and could literally spend hours in here walking up and down the aisles and filling my basket with lots of supplies. Most craft stores have a great selection of paper for scrapbooking and dollhouse wallpaper, which come in individual sheets or a book. The sheets typically range from about 25 cents to $2 each, and the books range from $14 to about $40. Okay, I stand corrected. I actually got one of the big scrapbook paper books. It had the perfect floral page on it for the bedroom. So I'm really happy about that. And thankfully this was actually on sale, so it was only $12. I also picked up another sheet of paper for Celeste's room. I actually got this like, I think this was like way back in, before I even found the dollhouse. So probably in February. Yeah, I fell in love with it and it was actually on sale at the time, but I got an extra one just in case. When I got home, I put the wallpaper and paint swatches into each room. I found this helped me visualize what the rooms were going to look like, and I also started thinking about the furniture and decor colors and textures. At this stage, it's super important that the color schemes and rooms look beautiful on their own, but also cohesive and balanced when looking at them together. It is a bit of a mind bender choosing all the wallpaper and colour schemes, so take your time and know that you can make changes along the way. After this, I cut a piece of scrap timber to make a new wall for the bathroom, in which I can only fit a toilet and a vanity at this stage. I do have a bath, but I'm not too sure if I'll include it. I really need to figure out if I can create another small room for this, but I just don't know if I want to sacrifice space in another room for the bath. Anyway, this is something I can worry about a little bit later. To keep the wall in place and nice and secure, I used wood glue and simply place it inside the dollhouse and let it dry overnight. Then it was time to start installing the wallpaper. The first thing I did was figure out how much paper I needed on the walls. I simply pushed a piece of paper up against the first wall, made creases around the wall, and used scissors to cut out the template. I made sure to allow for extra paper around the edges to hide the wallpaper seams later on. Then I simply applied some glue to the wall and pressed the paper on top. I used my hands to position the wallpaper in place and grabbed a spare piece of MDF that I had lying around in my studio as a scraper to remove any excess glue and air bubbles. Okay, so I'm in a bit of a pickle at the moment, and I'm just a little bit frustrated because this wasn't something I was expecting at all, but that's okay. These things happen in the world of DIY. So basically what's happened is I ordered this yellow floral paper off Etsy, and when it arrived, I could see that it had been printed by the person who actually owns that company. I have finished applying wallpaper to the kitchen walls, and straight away the paper started bubbling. I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. I applied glue onto the timber walls, onto the paper. I smoothed them out using this piece of MDF, and unfortunately that has not worked. There are so many bubbles under the paper, and I did a little bit of Googling, and apparently what you can do is slice a tiny hole into the bubble to let the air out and then obviously apply a little bit more glue, but I have tried that and it hasn't worked. So I think I know why this hasn't worked. I bought this paper from Etsy, and when it arrived I noticed that the paper itself had a bit of a film over it, and whilst I didn't think that was going to be an issue, I think this is what has caused the paper to bubble with the glue, because I have applied this cardstock to the back of my studio and it's worked totally fine. Kind of disappointing because this is actually supposed to be for doll houses, and obviously you are going to be applying glue onto it, and it just, yeah, it's not good paper for this type of job. So I've got two options. I can wait for the glue to dry overnight to see if I can fix it tomorrow, because the color is absolutely beautiful and I really do like the wallpaper. Or I can cut my losses and try and peel as much of the paper as I can off the walls and use this. But I don't love it, but it's definitely not the worst. So I do have some options. The thing is, I was planning on using this color for the cabinetry, and I'm not too sure if it goes. I think it does, but basically this is what I'm thinking. These are my wallpapers, and I'm just not too sure if this is too similar to that. The schemes are completely different, so I think I'll be okay. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I need to make some decisions pretty quickly. So I think what I'll do is I'll continue finishing the wallpaper in the other rooms. Hopefully I don't run into any other issues. As you can see, there are lots of air bubbles and the dark patches are from the wet craft glue, but it's not looking good. For now, I'm going to apply the wallpaper in the other rooms while figuring out a plan for the kitchen. So yesterday was really interesting to say the least. I learned a lot and I'm excited to share everything with you quickly right now. The first thing I learned is that it's really important to work somewhere where you have a lot of table space. So I noticed yesterday whilst I was applying the wallpaper onto the walls that I felt really restricted. I felt like I didn't have enough room because my table wasn't big enough. So today I've decided to work outside. We have a really big dining table. It's just going to be so much better for me because it means I'll have more space to place my tools and to access the dollhouse. Additionally, the lighting will be a lot better as well. Something I learned when it comes to choosing paper for your dollhouse is to choose a thick paper or a card stock. Paper that has a bit of a film over it does not work very well with craft glue. I also think choosing paper with a busy pattern helps to hide any imperfections, including paper seams, as well as if you do get a couple of bubbles here and there, if you need to cut the paper, you won't notice it as much. Speaking of paper seams, in Celeste's bedroom, I actually had to use quite a few pieces to wallpaper this side of her room. And because the paper is quite busy, there are a lot of florals, you don't notice it at all. So if I was using a different paper pattern like stripes or a solid color, you would definitely notice it. So I highly recommend, where possible, choose a busy pattern paper. Something else that really helped yesterday was using a scraper to remove any air bubbles and also to get rid of any excess glue. I didn't have a scraper at home, so I just used a piece of thin MDF and it worked really well. I also found that the MDF helped to push the paper in the corners, which I think has given the dollhouse wallpaper a really professional finish. With the kitchen, I just decided to cut my losses, and as you will have seen, I started tearing it off, but I realized because I was using thick paper stock anyway, that you wouldn't notice it underneath. So I just went for it and glued some new paper over the top. I'm actually really happy that I had that color. I really wanted to feature a yellow room with some burgundy tones, so I'm feeling very relieved I was able to make that happen yesterday. Speaking of paper, something I learned is that it's really important to make sure that you have enough. As you can see in some of these rooms, I did not have enough paper to cover the walls or the ceilings. So my big tip for wallpapering dollhouse doors is to always buy more than what you think you'll need. And the reason why I suggest that is not only so you have enough wallpaper to cover the entire room that you're working on, but also because when I called the craft store yesterday to see if they had another scrapbook booklet that I had been using throughout the dollhouse, they said they didn't have any left in Australia, and I looked on some other websites and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I now have to come up with some ideas for the ceilings. So that is a whole so that is a whole another project essentially. Not only do I need to make floors for 4 of the rooms, I need to come up with ideas for the ceilings for 4 of the rooms. Now, I had thought about painting a couple of them, which I think were really cute, but I'll definitely need ceiling cornices for them. Otherwise, I think it'll look quite flat. I would love to do a cottage Tudor style feature in one of the rooms as well. I'm thinking either the living room or our bedroom. And when it comes to the other rooms, I honestly have no idea. I'm just going to start working on the floors first. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to think about the ceilings. Speaking of the ceilings and the floors, now that I know I'm going to need some ceiling cornices, I definitely am going to need some skirting boards as well. So that's just another level of detail that I'm going to worry about once everything inside the rooms are finished in this stage of the project. Yesterday, when I realized I didn't have enough paper for a few of the rooms, I realized I am going to have to come up with some wall treatments. I know I'd already planned on doing 1 or 2 board and batten walls because board and batten actually features in one of the walls in our home. So I always knew I was going to do that. But I think I need to come up with another fresh idea just so the rooms look a little bit different. In addition to that, I also realized that I need to come up with something creative for the fireplaces. As you can see, they're quite long, and I think what's going to work really well in these rooms is if the walls, the ceilings, the fireplaces and the floors have a lot of texture. So I'm not quite too sure yet what I'm going to do. At this stage, I'm thinking for one of them, at the very least, I'm going to do horizontal cladding. And for the other one, I'm not quite too sure. I would like to keep them different. So that's the last thing I'll be working on in the rooms because I want to make the fireplaces a bit of a feature. And finally, something that was most unexpected was the bathroom. I had no idea what wallpaper I was going to use for that space, and I'm so relieved I had this green wallpaper. I think it looks really good, and I like that it anchors the rest of the colors in the dollhouse. So it's also made me think that maybe I should do a little bit of tiling in there. I'm not quite too sure. I'm just going to take this project one step at a time because there are so many more things that I need to finish before this phase is complete. So in terms of next steps, the first thing I'm going to do today is cut out all of the windows and the doors. Once that's done, I'm going to work on the floors. Then I'm going to work on the ceilings, and then I'm going to work on the fireplaces. So I've got a big day ahead of me. If I can get all the floors done today and potentially the wall treatments and all the ceilings, I will be very, very happy. I am very happy with the wallpaper I chose, but I had to make a few pivots along the way. I didn't have enough of the wallpaper I had originally selected in Dusty's room, so I used it to cover one wall, and luckily the scrap paper book I had bought from the craft store had another navy blue option, so I used that and thankfully I had enough. I used my craft knife to cut out the windows, and I was rubbish at it, so I think I might need to add some extra painted cork around the windowsills to hide the cut paper. Then it was time to make the floors. I was so excited about this part because I had saved some old cereal boxes which I wanted to use to create the template for the floors. I didn't want to have to buy more cardboard, and I love this sustainable alternative. To make the template, I just measured and cut and measured and cut until it fit snugly into the room. It was pretty easy. When researching ways to make floors for dollhouses, I saw a lot of tutorials over on Pinterest using wood glue, but I didn't love that the popsicle sticks slipped around and that it took 24 hours for the glue to dry. And if you didn't remember to place some heavy books on top, then it wouldn't dry flat. So I started wondering if I could use double-sided rug tape instead, and it worked. I was so happy. After laying the popsicle sticks down in an offset pattern, I trimmed the sides using scissors, which was super easy to do because I could bend the floor as I cut. I also didn't need to paint the cardboard beforehand because you can't see it underneath the sticks anyway. So I've just finished making the first floor, which I'm really happy with. I think using the double-sided tape is actually such a good idea because I don't have to worry about the glue drying overnight and none of the pieces are slipping around, and it was super easy to cut. So here we go. Wow, that looks so good. I think what I'm going to have to do, however, I'm happy, but I'm not like over the moon just yet. I think I need to slice off some of the pieces at the back here. But other than that, it's pretty good. I decided to sand the floors because the popsicle sticks were a bit scratchy to touch. From my years of upcycling and DIY experience, I know sanding the floors will make them smooth to touch, but also give them a more professional finish when I stain and paint them. And I was right because the timber stain glided over the floor smoothly and the finish was exceptionally gorgeous. I also made sure to stain the sides of the floor as well. The most satisfying part of making tiny timber floors for a dollhouse is placing them into the rooms. I also worked hard to make sure that the timber floors met together in the middle because I think these small, thoughtful touches make a big impact. I had to grab some extra jumbo popsicle sticks and got to work making the floors for the kids' bedrooms. For the main bedroom and my studio, I used standard size popsicle sticks but created different offset patterns for each room. And I did the same for the kids' bedrooms using the jumbo sticks. I decided to create timber stained floors for the main bedroom and my studio, but keep the kids' bedrooms light and bright by simply sanding the floors and leaving them raw. And so you're not fooled, renovating a dollhouse is a messy job and you need lots of room for your supplies, materials and tools. Then I got to work making the board and batten feature in our main bedroom. We have a board and batten wall in one of the rooms in our home, so it only seemed fitting to do that for the dollhouse. Although if I was doing this again, I would finish making the board and batten feature before gluing it onto the walls. The way I did it was finicky and look, it probably was not the best approach. I was itching to get the final popsicle floor done where I was going to make a herringbone pattern for the living room. I've never done this before, but after making the other floors, I felt like I had learned a lot, so I was excited to dive in and give it a go. I cut the popsicle sticks into 4.5 centimeter pieces, made a template for the floor using a cereal box, which I covered in double-sided tape. I drew a line down the middle using a ruler and started applying the herringbone pattern on top. If I could do this again, I would have started from the side to ensure I didn't have to cut the tiniest pieces in the world to fill in the gaps. So don't start from the middle, start from the side with the pieces hanging off, so at least it's easier to trim once you've finished. Next, I cut and glued pieces of jumbo popsicle sticks onto the main bedroom fireplace to create a horizontal cladding pattern. I spent the whole time wondering which colour I should paint it, and after a lot of debate with Jace, I decided to paint it navy blue, which was his suggestion. Unfortunately, I had splattered some paint on the walls, so I used some spare bits of paper to cover them up, and it worked beautifully. The living room fireplace already had a lovely texture to it, so I decided to paint it and tidy it up on the sides using hobby wood and to the front using skewers. I also decided to add a mantle to the front after being inspired by Studio McGee's many gorgeous fireplaces I had pinned to my Pinterest boards over the years. Following this, I made tiles for the bathroom using a cereal box and craft paper. After scraping the paper to get rid of excess glue and air bubbles, I let it dry in the sunshine for about 10 minutes. I used a ruler and a craft knife to draw and cut 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter tiny tiles. I recommend using a metal ruler when you're cutting with a craft knife. If you use a plastic ruler, the craft knife will slice into it. Making these tiny tiles brought me so much joy and satisfaction, and I glued them onto a painted piece of cereal cardboard, making sure to leave gaps in between the tiles to create the look of forest green tile grout. I also glued a piece of cardboard from a pasta box to make sure the tiled floor was level with the timber floor. I really wanted to be finished working with the popsicle stick, so I decided to make the ceiling treatments next for our main bedroom and my studio. I repeated the same steps as the floors, gave each ceiling a different offset pattern, and painted the ceiling in the bedroom to match the board and batten, and the ceiling in my studio to match a piece of furniture I plan on making in that space. I was so excited to make the kitchen floor because I found this placemat at a charity shop for $1 and knew it would look super cute as a checker floor. I used another cereal box as the template, glued the placemat on top, trimmed the sides with scissors and painted it. I was very exhausted by this point, so I decided to paint the ceiling in the kitchen and the living room, finish the wall treatments in my studio and kitchen, and then I was done. Woohoo! Okay, let's talk about all the incredible tiny details. For our main bedroom, I applied scrapbook paper to the walls, made a stained timber floor in an offset pattern, made a board and batten feature wall with timber stained skirting boards, added horizontal cladding to the fireplace, which I painted, and made a textural ceiling treatment using jumbo popsicle sticks in an offset pattern before painting it. Next door, I applied scrapbook paper to the walls, made a stained timber floor in an offset pattern, made a checker pattern feature wall using 2 different pieces of pattern paper, added a wall to create a space for a bath, and made a painted ceiling treatment using jumbo sticks in an offset pattern. You'll also begin to notice I added painted pieces of cork to the window sills and arched doorways to hide the cut paper and give it a more professional finish. I kept the kids' bedroom simple but light and fresh. For Celeste's bedroom, I drenched the walls in the same scrapbook paper and made a raw timber floor in an offset pattern. Next door, in Dusty's room, I made a raw timber floor in a different offset pattern, but worked really hard to make sure the floors met under the archway. For Dusty's walls, I used 2 different pieces of patterned scrapbook paper, which I absolutely love. For the living room, I drenched the walls in floral paper, made a timber stained floor in a herringbone pattern, and painted the fireplace and added fluted corners and a mantle. For the bathroom, I used contrasting floral paper for the walls and made tiles for the floors. For both spaces, I painted the ceiling and added timber stained skirting boards and ceiling cornices. I have a lot of exciting plans for the kitchen, so I decided to keep things really simple at this stage. I applied scrapbook paper to the walls, made a feature half wall using a cereal box and floral paper, painted the ceiling and added painted cornices, and painted a placemat for the checker floor. I am so happy. This part of my gingerbread dollhouse renovation is complete. It was so challenging and obviously it was a lot of fun as well, but I had no idea the volume of work that was going to be involved in this part. I think that's because I was learning everything along the way, which will make it so much easier for you to try at home, because I have gone through so much pleasure and pain that I hope in sharing all of my tips and advice and the process makes this experience so much more enjoyable for you. In saying that, this was not a negative experience. This was so much fun. There were definitely elements I loved more than others, but now that I'm at the finish line, I am so proud of myself and everything I was able to achieve. There are some really important things that I think you need to know. Plan as much as you can before you get started, including any paint colors you intend to use, wallpaper, ceiling and floor treatments. The more planning you do before you dive in, the less overwhelming it will be. Something that really helped me when I was in the planning phase is placing paint swatches and wallpaper cards in each room of the house, just so I could see that everything was working really well together. Not only does this help give every room its own beautiful scheme, but it also makes sure that the overall look of your dollhouse has a cohesive feel. In addition, you don't want to be using green in 3 rooms on one side. You want to make sure that those colors are balanced and spaced out between the rooms. Buy way more wallpaper than you think you're going to need. As you will have seen in my case, I didn't buy enough, and when I went to go and buy some more, I found out that I couldn't find it anywhere online. So I had to come up with a few plan Bs, which in the end not only pushed me creatively, but I think because I had to come up with a lot of other solutions, it ended up making the dollhouse look more beautiful and original. It is such a shame that the majority of the wallpaper that I used in this renovation is no longer available. So what I have done is I've included links to some other options in the description below. Where possible, I do recommend buying your wallpaper in person so you can check that the scale of the pattern or the print is perfect for a dollhouse. I know that that's not always going to be possible, so wherever you can, just make sure that the scale is really suitable for a dollhouse. Be prepared to cut a lot of popsicle sticks. My fingers felt so battered and bruised, and I also got blisters, and it was a lot, but as people say, it definitely was worth it because I think where we're at now, the gingerbread dollhouse looks absolutely gorgeous. The thing is, it is quite a monotonous task, so I recommend doing it as a bit of a couch crafting session when you're watching TV at night. Don't use too much glue, but also don't use too little. There is a little bit of an art as to how much glue you use, so I recommend somewhere in the middle. It also really helps if you have a scraper of some sort, where you can smooth out the paper as soon as you have applied it to the wall. This will basically get rid of excess glue and make sure to remove any air bubbles that get trapped behind the wallpaper. I recommend using a paint scraper, or in my case, a spare piece of MDF which you can use to scrape along the wallpaper. As long as it's flat and can get into those tight corners, it really doesn't matter what you use. Just be careful though, when you are gliding your scraper across the wallpaper, not to rip it because the glue is wet underneath and that can happen. Thankfully for me it didn't, but whilst I was scraping my wallpaper, I could see how easily that could happen. I recommend giving any popsicle floors or ceilings a sand with a sander. Sanding not only makes your popsicle sticks smooth to touch, it also gives it a professional finish, and if you apply stain or paint on top of your sanded popsicle sticks, the finish is even more gorgeous. Paint and prepare as much as you can before you glue it into your dollhouse. Now in my case, something that ended up being an absolute pain was the chimney. I was umming and ahhing for ages as to what color to paint the chimney. But what I ended up doing was just getting on with it and gluing my popsicle sticks to the chimney. And even though I knew painting was going to be difficult, I certainly wasn't expecting it to be such a challenge. I was tossing up between brown, red, and a navy blue for the chimney, and it really got to the point where I had driven to the gym and I was Googling colors at the gym while I was using my weight machines. Then I drove over to my local hardware store and I was calling Jason on the phone and I was just asking for his advice because he is so good with colors. And in the end, I went with navy blue as per his suggestion. And I'm so glad I did because I was able to come home and just paint the chimney straight away. I also had to break my paintbrush so I could actually fit it inside the dollhouse while I was painting. And in some instances, I did get some paint on the wallpaper, but I was actually able to hide that pretty efficiently. So obviously in some cases, it's going to be unavoidable, but where possible, try and paint as much as you can before you pop it into the rooms. Something I noticed along the way was that I kept changing my mind 100 million times about all the little details. I honestly felt like I was becoming a little unhinged, but I think that's just part of the entire process. So to avoid feeling overwhelmed and stressed, Don't have a deadline in mind that's super tight. I've seen a few really big influencers, a couple in America, who say that they've done a dollhouse renovation within a week, and that is not possible. They are not being genuine at all. And I know they do it for that rush factor, pulls everyone in. But the reality is, unless you've got a team doing all the intricate details for you, there is absolutely no way something like this can be done in a week. So in my case, I kind of had an inkling that this would take a while. So I've given myself as much time as possible before Christmas, so 6 months actually, to get the physical creating, making aspect of this project done. So just be mindful of that. Something that really helped me along the way is to write down all of my ideas while I'm making. So I often found that I was installing some wallpaper, but then I would come up with a really good idea for making a sofa. So what I've been doing is writing down all my ideas, and then I'll go back to those ideas when I go through to the next part of this gingerbread dollhouse renovation. Now, a glue gun will be the hero of any dollhouse renovation. And if it wasn't for this one, honestly, I don't know how I could have gotten any of this complete. So make sure you get one. This is obviously one by Ryobi. It is phenomenal, and it has just been an absolute lifesaver. You will get so addicted to making all the tiny details perfect, but there is a point where you need to stop obsessing. Otherwise, I think it'll totally do your head in and you might not end up enjoying the process. So just be mindful that it is totally okay to obsess over the details, but not to let it totally consume you. Because at the end of the day, you are making a dollhouse for some kids who are going to love it, no matter if it's perfect or not. Renovating the walls, floors, and ceilings was more exhausting than I expected, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm definitely going to keep this real. I was at a point where I thought I had finished, but then I realized I didn't have any form of place for people living in my dollhouse to have a bath or a shower. And I was at that point where I just started to feel quite burnt out. But then after speaking to Jason, I realized that that was just something I needed to include. So I ended up including a little room for the bath next to my studio. And there were so many things I could have done. I could have done tiling, board and batten, but in the end, I just decided to cut a piece of timber and glue some paper on it and just keep it really simple. I know I want to put some cornicing on it later on because I do have big plans for my studio. But you know, there are points in this project where you have to sort of choose between that push and pull on how far you want to go. I think it's totally okay to keep things simple, but then for some other areas, really devote some time and attention to all those gorgeous tiny little details, because honestly, in the end, it's really worth it. And I think having a combination of both is really good for your mental health. I'm really glad I put that little bathroom in next to my studio, because I think having that pink wallpaper brings so much more depth to the space. If you're feeling tired and overwhelmed and you're not sure, just have a good night's sleep, and then tomorrow morning, get that energy up and go for it, because I promise you, you won't regret it. Where possible, involve the kids who you're renovating a dollhouse for. It was so cute having Dusty and Celeste come in, have a look around. They chose their own wallpaper colors. They told me where they thought things would go. They helped me choose colors, and I know this is supposed to be a big surprise for them, and it will, because I'm not going to show them what it looks like once all the furniture is in. But being able to have that experience with them is absolutely timeless, and I am just so happy that they were involved. So if and when you can, do get the kids involved. In addition, my daughter Celeste had a really great idea for something Christmassy in the dollhouse, and I hadn't thought about it, and she is so right, so I've noted that down and I'm going to make that happen. If you know me well, then you'll know I have already started planning the layout for the furniture and all the decor pieces for every room. I thought I was going to go pretty hard with a cottage theme, but I really love mid-century modern meets contemporary, so I am really excited to show you what this is actually going to look like. Some of the rooms are going to be very grown up, and obviously the kids' rooms are going to be super fun, but I'm not going to go hell for leather with a total cottage theme. Obviously the wallpaper and the board and batten in our bedroom and a few other areas is very cottage, but I kind of feel like I wouldn't be true to me and my style and how we like to live at home if I wasn't including some elements that you may have already seen me make throughout the last couple of years. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited. So thank you so much for joining me for this part of my gingerbread dollhouse renovation. If you've got any questions or ideas or suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. I will always respond, and I really appreciate any help, tips or advice that you may have for me. For the next part, I'm going to be working on the furniture, and there are a few pieces I need to make, and I've already started planning and I'm really excited. I will also be teaching myself how to use a renovating scroll saw, which is a great tool for cutting hobby wood such as balsawood and basswood. So I'm really excited to dive in and learn how to use that power tool and also show you how to use it. Anyway, if you've loved anything in this episode or if you've learned something new, make sure you give it a like. And if you love this gingerbread dollhouse renovation series, make sure you're subscribing so you never miss an episode.